I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. What is up, everybody? Not a lot has happened in my personal life in the past week, but I have been thinking about the TikTok ban that potentially is happening, and I'm not okay because I have been addicted to watching Big Brother Italy on TikTok, these random clips. It's all in Italian. I don't know what's happening, but I do know that there's these two women falling in love, and I can't stop checking in on my little Sims every day. So yeah, I'm not loving that this could potentially go away. I do know how weird that sounds when I say it out loud that I'm checking on these strangers every day. Anyway, if this is your first time checking in on this podcast and listening, it is a business podcast. I promise. So to get me back on track, let's introduce my guest today. It's Lorrie Baldevia, Platinum President for AssuredPartners. Hi, Lorrie.
How are ya?
I'm good. Good to see you. Thanks for hosting. We are in your whiskey club here on the 21st floor downtown. And you said it used to be your founder's office, and now it's meant for people that are here for 10 years longer, right?
Right. It's a decade club, and, we commemorate anybody that served 10 or more plus years. There's a whiskey or a wine glass and a full bar, and it's just a fun environment. I mean, honestly, you used to come here when you were hired or when you're in trouble. So now you get to come here every day. You bring our clients and have a good time.
Or you're on a podcast now, right? And then we met 2023. I was producing the Women Who Lead Summit, and I was trying to find some speakers for my closing panel. And I had you on there, and I loved you on the panel. I think you were the first one to curse, and I was like, oh, great. She's opened the doors. Now we can curse on this panel. But I'm really glad to have you back on the podcast. And we were joking about how you're making insurance cool.
No doubt. I mean, I think I'm, when you meet me in real life, I'm much shorter than I sound. And I do think that insurance may not seem cool, but I could be the most different insurance leader you meet. And I'm trying to make it cool again, because when you think of insurance, especially in this environment, it's like, oh, but you meet Laura, you're like, you know what?
Yeah.
I think she's pretty cool. So hopefully we get to learn more about it together today.
Let's do it. Okay. So a little bit of background about you. You've been with AssuredPartners. This is going to be your 25th year. You're currently on the board of Finseca, which is a global board, and it's a financial services organization. You've previously served on the board of Financial Group and Seattle University. You co-founded EnVision, a youth program that supports unique field trips for STEM. And you founded what's called GM Dinner for Great Moms, an annual Mother's Day event for the homeless and disadvantaged mothers. And just in general, you do a lot of work in the community to help underserved people. Does that sound about right?
Right. I've done a lot of things.
You have done a lot of things.
Done a lot of things. At the end of the day, I want to help people, whether it's my clients, whether it's our employees, and I want to make an impact. And sometimes I often say to everybody, it's not who you know, it's who remembers you. So you remembering me being the first person who cussed on that panel, I remember it too. And that's a good thing. I think people remember people for doing good things. I'm hoping to make an impact no matter what area I serve.
Yeah, I love that. So for the audience, you mentioned you work in insurance, but can you give your elevator pitch for what exactly AssuredPartners does?
Sure. So if you think about it in general, we are in the benefits and the insurance world. We can help your business. We can help your employees, your executives. We can help you personally with your family, your home, any of your things. We insure everything from that perspective. We're a risk management organization. We've been doing it for many years. AssuredPartners, our firm, my firm in particular, was MCM, was the original firm. We were sold to AssuredPartners in 2015, but we've always been in this risk mitigation consulting practice. So we can think about anything that you have risk, we can insure.
Oh, that's great. And how did you get into this work? How did you get into insurance?
Really by accident. I actually have a financial services background, money management background, working at Merrill Lynch and First Investors, and I got recruited. I went to Seattle University. I'm originally from Guam, is where I'm from, and the founder of our organization was on the board of SU and wanted to find somebody to join the firm. So I got recruited, and I've been here ever since. So I'm really a product of somebody that's worked from the bottom up. So you think about individuals in my 25-year tenure, started at the bottom in service and analytics and production, and I became a partner and then became COO of our company and then president of the company now. So a lot of moving parts, grown with the organization. So I have a really good lens of why the insurance business is a really cool business to invest in and join. Really.
Yeah. I didn't prep you for this question, but I was just thinking, being here for 25 years, if you weren't in insurance, what would you be doing? Do you know?
you're going to laugh when I tell you this. So right before I got this job here and going into financial services, I had an option actually to join a wine distribution company where I would basically sell wine all over to businesses, right? And I don't remember, I think it was Gallo at the time. I would choose, it was either sell wine or get into financial services and insurance. And I thought at the time, I thought I didn't even drink a lot of wine then. Clearly I'm drinking a lot of wine now. But fast forward, if somebody asked me, Lorrie, what would you do after you left insurance? I would probably, retire if I could, would I own a winery maybe? Or I would literally work at a winery and serve wine to people because everybody is happy when you're wine tasting. So it's just a conundrum that I denied that job to this one, and now I want to go back to that one day.
Okay, in a few years, find Lorrie in Woodinville.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to talk about our stories. We have 4 for you today. The first one is a potential merger with AssuredPartners, the company we're talking about, and Gallagher. Then our next story is JCPenny and Eddie Bauer doing a potential merger. And then Porch.com is shifting over to a homeowners insurance business model. And lastly, we'll talk about some REI layoffs. So, Lorrie, are you ready to get into it?
Right.
The first one. I'm going to do my best to recap the article, but obviously this is about your company, so you can correct me at any point here. But Arthur J. Gallagher and Company is the full name, but they go by Gallagher here, and they're going to acquire AssuredPartners for close to $14 billion in an all-cash transaction. This is going to be one of the largest acquisitions in the insurance brokerage industry. For context, AssuredPartners is the 11th largest insurance broker in the U.S. They have offices in the U.S., UK, and Ireland. Part of why this wanted to happen is that Gallagher wanted to expand its middle market business. And for those that don't know, what is a middle market? That's a company that has revenues between 10 million and 1 billion. What else to say? AssuredPartners, it said they have about 11,000 employees on this. Is that around right?
That's right.
That's kind of what's happening. And I thought that it had already gone through, but you corrected me in that it's not quite signed pen paper. So I know this was announced about a month ago, but can you talk to us about how this merger came to be?
Sure. AssuredPartners is one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing insurance brokerages ever. We hit $1 billion of revenue in a very short time in 7 years, and we're close to $3 billion of revenue today. And so the reality is that we are an organization that is private equity backed and partner owned. So 30% of our business is partner owned, and we were already on the path to go public. What people don't know is that we've grown so big over the years that the next path would be to be a publicly traded company. So the Gallagher news really, in all honesty, it was news to a lot of our employees because we thought public is where we're going to be, and we are public. So it was just a faster track to going public.
Because Gallagher's already public. Yeah.
Gallagher is already public, right? And to a broker that is middle market as well. So what's happened is that we have 2 large organizations that are joining forces in a space that we're very similar, and honestly in a culture that's very similar to ours. Gallagher was a single office since 1927 that grew to the 3rd largest in the world. And when you think about AssuredPartners, we're in that same model. Many of us were single practices like my original practice and growing into a global entity. So, we're super excited about it. We have similar culture and the resources that they've built. I was just in Chicago yesterday, so right off the presses, the benefits that they'll bring to our clients will be amazing. So, we joined AssuredPartners many years ago, over 10 years ago, as our practice MCM because of the resources. And now we're joining a global entity and going to be 3rd largest in the world. So what an exciting time for not only our employees, but our clients as well.
Absolutely. And I know we've seen the FTC sort of block some of these mergers. We're seeing that a little bit with like the Albertsons Kroger situation. Do you think that this is going to be one where they're going to try to stop it, or do you think that it's not too much of a monopoly? I
think it's going to be fine. At the end of the day, it's like we're similar businesses, and they've already held their ranking as 3rd largest. We're going to add to that. But what you're going to probably see is more similar mergers like this. And so I don't think this is the first. Many insurance companies, insurance brokerages are backed by private equity, and there's a lot of pressure, margin pressure and interest rate pressure and debt pressure that you're going to see a lot more of this happening in the future. So.
Last question on this. I have to ask, are you worried about your role? Because I know a lot of times with acquisitions and mergers, they don't need another president. They don't need another CFO, or they want to bring in their own. Do you think that could happen?
Sure. A lot of people ask me that. My clients are calling, my people are calling. At the end of the day, I'm not worried at all. Yeah. I think leaders lead, and there is a ton of opportunity at Gallagher. We just in the meeting yesterday, they're trying to hire 8,000 people a year, and it's going to be okay. What I will say is that, people follow people, and I think it's important for any leader. I think the way that I approach things is that when my entire team is really, really good, you can tell you're a good leader when everyone around you is so good. And I feel that. So if everybody is elevating, then I've done my job. So I always say, if I get hit by a bus, everybody, that you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And let's be the same, right? No matter where our paths grow, the fact that we can function and our people can lead themselves is really a sign of a healthy leader and a healthy organization. So no, I'm not worried at all. Maybe, who knows? I might sell wine.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got
I'm not going to do that. For those listening, like, where are you going? No. I'm really opportunity, and there's a lot of great opportunity at Gallagher. They have really great people. I got to meet them. So I'm super excited about this opportunity.
Awesome. Well, hey, congrats. I think that's a big win for you. Yeah. All right, we're going to move on to our next article, which is about JCPenny and Eddie Bauer. I'm going to try not to say JCPenney's. I realize that it's JCPenny. But Spark Group is the ownership group for different companies like Aeropostale, Brooks Brothers, Eddie Bauer, Lucky Brand, Forever 21, and Nautica. So that group of retailers is going to join with JCPenney. They're going to create a new company called Catalyst Brands. This is going to be headquartered in Plano, Texas, but there is going to be an office in Seattle. The new company is going to be led by Mark Rosen. So he's the current JCPenney CEO. So he'll lead this new combined company. Eddie Bauer is going to get a new CEO. He was only brought on late in 2022. So they're going to swap him out for somebody else. They say that the merger won't alter any intellectual property, and it was an all-equity transaction. So I want to take just a quick minute here because I did a deep dive on Eddie Bauer, and I thought it was interesting. Do you know a lot about Eddie Bauer?
I do. They're right across the street. Their first store one is, I think, 2 blocks from us here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Eddie Bauer, yes. And my husband actually worked for Eddie Bauer in college. No way. So I'm like, and I had many friends work for Eddie Bauer. So really, this is an outdoorsy area, and I can see, everyone knew about Eddie Bauer for years and years.
Okay, so this is what I found out. So he was a real person. He was born on Orcas Island. In 1920, he opens his first sports shop in downtown Seattle. He makes fishing flies. He's big into fishing and hunting. One year, he gets hypothermia on a fishing trip, and it inspires him to make he patents this down jacket, a really warm jacket, and that was in 1940. So he was the first one to patent that, and then a couple years later, they make their first women-specific down jacket, and they patent that, and his wife was a big advocate for the women's department. And then a little bit after that, he started manufacturing sleeping bags and flight suits and all these things for the Army and the Air Force because they saw what he was making. He was also outfitting all these expeditions, all these people climbing Mount Everest and whatnot. And then you get into 1968 and he retires. He's done. So he sells it to his hunting partner, which I think was also his business partner, but sells it to his buddy. And 1971, General Mills buys it. And then in 1988, Spiegel, which is kind of like a Montgomery Ward, Sears type company, acquires it. And then flash forward to 2003, Spiegel files for bankruptcy and they sell their headquarters in Redmond to Microsoft. 2005, they emerge from bankruptcy, but 2009, Eddie Bauer files for bankruptcy, and that's when private equity acquires it. And then in 2021, it was acquired by the Spark Group. So I know that's a lot of stuff, but it's transferred ownership quite a bit, and it's landed with Spark. And then, like I said, all of this is combining with JCPenney. So speaking of mergers, let's talk about, I know your company provides insurance for companies that are going through mergers or acquisitions. Can you talk about what specifically you help them with? And if you were, if you were Eddie Bauer or JCPenney, if you were helping them, if they were one of your clients, kind of what would you be providing them?
Sure. So we have a whole M&A practice, right? And, that would be really representing the buyer or the seller. And so in general, when you're acquiring an organization, you're going to want to evaluate risk associated with the organization. So oftentimes we help the buyers really evaluate any risk that is involved with what they have. Let's say they might have some lawsuits that are pending and looking at that and anything around that. So we have an all M&A practice that does it. If you're a seller, oftentimes, you may have risks that the buyer might not want, right? Let's say you have a lawsuit that's pending and they might exclude any claims associated with the sale price. And so you would want to purchase some level of insurance, tail insurance, to help with that. If you
mentioned tail insurance. Can you explain what tail insurance is?
Tail insurance is basically insurance coverage that you need to have from a particular date. If there's any risk associated post-sale, that you would have coverage that would pay for any of those risks. So it kind of continues on. There's some risk because the new buyer wouldn't buy any of that and wouldn't have to help pay for any of that particular risk. And one thing I also want to note, if you are an M&A and let's say you're a board of directors and officers, there's directors and officers coverage as well, because any decision that the board makes, that things of that nature, that you want coverage around there as well. So protecting both the owners and the officers and protecting the entity from any claims or any other risk that might come up post-sale.
Okay. So in your time dealing with some of these, I know you're so much higher level, so you're not dealing with some of these exact situations, but have you heard stories from your time and your 25 years of examples of when this insurance was really needed, or kind of just any kind of story from some mergers or acquisitions? Sure.
At the end of the day, there's a couple ones where you say you have a disgruntled employee because they were promised X and Y and they just come out of the woodwork, right? Or they might have had some trauma for some sort and they come out of the woodwork. There's things, and a lot of it's contractual obligations. Let's say that you had a product that you sold and then something happened down the line. And so those are some kind of examples of where you would see that might come in. A lot of it's contractual obligations, honestly, where you see that.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to say on this story?
No, obviously JCPenny is old school for those who have that. I love going into their stores and Eddie Bauer. So I think, my original comment of AssuredPartners and Gallagher merging, there's going to be this, private equity is going to look for ways to kind of merge and capitalize in some way. And that's very similar to what happened to us as well, like anybody that has private equity backing. So I can see more of that occurring when you're kind of buying people and a brand that helps you get some market share. So this is, you're going to, I think about all the mergers that have happened throughout the years. I continue to see that, but I've loved both of those brands. So when you talk about Spiegel too, I remember that the big catalog.
I don't remember.
You don't remember. I think I'm much older than you. So when you're going through this, I'm like, oh God, I remember that big catalog.
Yeah.
I remember taking your Christmas photo at JCPenny. So I'm an old schooler.
Yeah.
So anyhow, exciting for both of these brands.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Our next article is about Porch. They are shifting their business model a little bit and they're going into the homeowners insurance industry. So Porch launched in 2013 and then I have to admit that I actually worked for them in 2016. I worked there for 7 months, so it was pretty short. But when I was there, I worked in customer success and they were kind of like an Angie's List, sort of like a thumbtack kind of. Basically, if a homeowner wanted, a painter or a plumber or general contractor, they could go and kind of basically see like a MySpace of each plumber or each painter and see their different projects. Or they could submit like, hey, I want 5 bids for this thing. Anyway, that was the model when I was there. I've heard that it's kind of shifted since then. And then in 2020, they went through a merger with a special purpose acquisition company to go public. I don't know what that means. I don't know if, Lorrie, you have any insight on that. And then in 2021, they entered the insurance space by purchasing Homeowners of America. So yeah, that's kind of the article.
Sure. No. And special acquisition, you're probably hiring somebody to help really find buyers at the end of the day. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, there's a lot of companies can take a company public and usually kind of working with an M&A advisor to help you with that as well. So yeah, no, it's interesting. And as I was thinking about this article, and it's really not too different from the model that we had when my original company, MCM. And really, you're in the business of helping people. So when your clients need help, you're finding ways to help. And so when I started in our firm many years ago, we were just kind of individual life insurance and financial services, and we added employee benefits, and we had commercial insurance, personal insurance. So you sort of expand the model. So this is, it doesn't surprise me, is just finding ways to cross-serve your clients and expanding a market that you already have, right? Building upon it at the end of the day. So. Yeah.
So, I guess what's unique to the insurance business model that they're going to have to now deal with versus maybe a more traditional model or the models that they've had before? What do you think they need to prepare for?
Sure. It's interesting because of the homeowners insurance, like many of you probably experiencing, a lot of pricing, is basically subject to, what you're insuring, right? Prices, the geography, all those aspects, right? And so when I think of the insurance business in general, I'm one of the reasons why I'm thinking they're wanting to get in and they have to think about it is because it's easy to obtain those clients, right? They're already working with Porch in some capacity. I think they're going to have to think of what kind of markets, what are they selling? I really don't know much about their practice. Are they insuring the risk on their own? Are they working with other carriers? Are they brokeraging it? Those are some of the things that I'm unsure of. But it's going to be really interesting because when you're kind of in a place where it's so easy, you're really not really looking at what the price coverage is, right? You know, sometimes it's so easy, but is it more expensive than somebody that if you were to do due diligence when you work with a broker who is agnostic to the various carriers? So again, I'm really unsure of how their model works. I'm assuming they have a variety of carriers that they can place. But that's something to think about is, you know, what kind of markets are they serving? What kind of carriers are they working with? And, home coverage is, you know, increasing. And, you know, just due to the environment we're in, I know we're going to talk a little bit about, you and I were just chatting about the LA fires and the impact that will have to homeowners insurance in general in that California area. So just a different world, and a lot of things that affect pricing for insurance coverage.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. So I've heard that it's controversial. There's some anger that they've heard that people in LA were denied fire insurance. And now obviously a lot of people have lost their homes, and I think people are pretty upset by that. Then we also have a separate story about the health insurance CEO being murdered. So I want to kind of give you the space. Is there something that you think the audience or general public maybe isn't understanding about the insurance industry? Like, what's your kind of take on the LA fires and the fire insurance?
Sure. So it's really interesting as I was thinking about this is like at the end of the day, if you have coverage, you're not denying coverage, but what's happening is that they may not be renewing your coverage, right? Because of the area you're in. So as I mentioned, just insurance coverage and pricing is based on many things like the environment you're in, right? So the California fires that we're dealing with in California is not too far from the floods that we're dealing with in Florida, right? What insurance companies are really undergoing is the risk is so great, right, in those areas. And we're affected by it here in Washington. We have many clients that have homes in California. There is actually a moratorium where you couldn't even quote in California now because of they have so much risk they're trying to deal with. There was a stat that I just heard just yesterday that they're really dealing with 60 billion of claims. Think about all those homes that are there. So if you're an insurance carrier, there's only so much that you can handle in that area. And so that's what you find out carriers pulling out of those particular areas. So if you think about it, one thing I would advise is that really look at your homeowner's coverage, and what does it include? And usually it's not everything. People think, okay, I bought insurance, it includes everything. But really, they have certain factors. Like if you're covering for flood, you need a flood policy. If you're covering for fire, you need a fire. If you have earthquake, you need that. So you really have to look closely at what it actually covers, right? Because that dictates price. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's always the base and there's things that you would add upon. And so I really would encourage that you work with your advisors to really find out what is truly covered. And again, I do think you and I were chatting just briefly that, this non-renewal, people are not renewing just because of the risk. But just yesterday, so hot off the press is the insurance commissioner advised that there can be no more non-renewals. Right. And so what's happening is that these insurance carriers are working through that because of the risk. I mean, at the end of the day, pricing is dictated based on multiple factors and the insurance company just, has certain limits of what they can actually adhere to, if that makes sense. So it comes both ways. Yeah. It definitely is unfortunate, but the world changes. The same thing happened with COVID, right? If you think about businesses that lost their business or you couldn't earn income, right? And, there are some policies that covered that business interruption, but there are some that have very specifically for viruses. And so it's really, no matter what you have, it'd be really important for you to really have a good understanding of how your insurance is structured.
Yeah, it sounds like some of the headlines, I think it's kind of portraying insurance companies. When I first read it, it's kind of like these big bad insurance companies that are super greedy and they just want all this profit and they're not renewing these people because they don't want to spend all the money. And what I'm hearing from you is a little bit of like, they don't have the money to insure all of these people in a very high risk situation. And so it's almost like a bigger picture problem of like, maybe insurance companies is not how we solve for this. Maybe that's something like government intervention. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. And I think about it, it's a combination, right? I mean, the reality is that you can cover risk as an insurance carrier, but there are government regulations as to how much reserves you need to have that amount of risk. So I really do think, the thought of this is like having our stakeholders as we think about insurance risk and pricing in the future is having, our stakeholders all work together to say, okay, the government is wanting me to have this amount, but, these are the amount of risk, and maybe we need to meet in the middle so that we can actually, help our clients and not really impact pricing for, people.
Right. Because you don't want them paying $1,000 a month or whatever.
Exactly.
It is.
And so it's mitigating that. There's the overall cost. There's things that you need to have in place, and somebody's got to meet in the middle. And otherwise, individuals are going to have to pay for the difference. Right. And so those are some of the things that, you think about the insurance marketplace in the coming years, having more stakeholders work together so we can come up with a solution that's going to help everybody.
Yeah. One of my questions was going to say, what do you hope for the insurance industry in the future? And it sounds like you kind of answered that. So thank you. Yeah. Right. And thanks for touching on that topic. I know some people kind of want to steer clear, but I think it's important to come at it from different angles. I'm going to shift slightly a little bit here, but still on this topic. Within insurance, you work with a lot of high net worth individuals. Well, from the website, it looks like you're dealing with not only homeowners insurance, but we're talking about boat insurance and art collection insurance and their third home insurance and all of that. How is working with this demographic any different? And do you have any kind of crazy stories of what you've insured?
Sure. So at the end of the day, when you accumulate assets, whether it's your business or your employees, there's risk associated with that. So in the high net worth world, not in addition to all the toys and the things that you've collected, the art collections, the cars, really, as you look at wealth, there's taxation. Like we're providing insurance policies for future tax that you're going to have to pay. And so it's really looking their entire risk profile to say, okay, if I pass and I transfer my wealth to my family, my kids, there's some risk associated, there's some taxation associated with that, right? So it's really kind of looking at a holistic view, both from the financial side and then from all the toys that you have. And so it's a different approach and it's more consultative. It's not about price. It's more about really being creative and understanding what the risk is, because some of the times you're self-insuring yourself, right? I have billionaires that we've looked at where they just can't insure all this risk. I mean, it's too expensive, right, to do that. So really, what are you comfortable with so that you don't have to sell your assets to pay for these taxes or to pay for costs associated if you're no longer here? A lot of fun things. I mean, there's many things I've done. I think one of the things you have, what are some of the crazy stories? I mean, we're insuring things of value, right? And, some of the things I was thinking about, somebody's Star Trek collection. I think of the Pacific Palisades in LA. The homes are worth $4 to $5 million, but there's stuff in there that are just irreplaceable. And it may not be something of value to somebody, but for others it is. Like their Star Trek collection, their antique gas pumps. I was talking that they have. There's also obscure things like, insuring, one of the weirdest ones that we've done, we have a family that wanted to insure their daughter's wedding, and to ensure that if she was a runaway bride, that would be covered. You know how much weddings cost. And I do. You can insure those things of value, right? Anything that is insurable. You can do anything, and it's going to cost you. But, to ensure that if that risk occurs, you have to be covered. And, you can kind of think, you can get really, really creative in this market. So it's just a lot of different things. Including the Picasso's, antique cars. Sure. There's obscure things you can insure as well.
Dang. That's so funny. I'm so glad you had answers to that. My only experience with insurance, I recently had to get business insurance because I'm a contractor. I have my LLC. I knew nothing about this. And basically it's like, if I have a client and I don't fulfill, like I don't plan the event right or something, they could come after me. And instead of coming after my own assets and like my own stuff, they're suing my LLC. That's my understanding of it. So I also didn't know that I talked, like you were saying, basically brokers. So I had this one woman I talked to and she went out to other people to get options. And I talked to this other guy and he got options and all this kind of stuff. But did you know that if you are an MC, they denied me. They wouldn't insure me as an MC.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, what? Like, I'm not going to damage the hotel, but I guess it's too much risk. And I was like, anyway, I was very surprised by that. So I did eventually get one company agreed to do it because I do some emceeing on the side, but I guess I don't know. I wonder if it's like auctioneering and emceeing. Maybe you don't raise enough money for the fundraiser you did. I didn't have
That's
a good
interesting. Usually there's a contractual obligation insurance. So based on whatever the contractual obligation is, there should be some level of coverage that you can buy. You can obtain it through more organizations like Lloyd's of London and things of that. That's where the runaway bride insurance comes from.
Yeah.
So think about the contractual obligation. If it doesn't come, I still have a contractual obligation to pay. So those are some things that maybe you and I can chat about.
I would say maybe you should help
you with that.
Yeah. Maybe switch my plan.
There you go.
Okay, our last article is about REI. So they're doing layoffs, but I think I want to dive a little bit more into this, in that they are closing down what's called their experiences department. So this is going to include their outdoor classes, their events, and their tours. It's really struggling to break even. I didn't know this, but it's actually never made a profit. Even in their best year in 2019, it still didn't make a profit. What they do is they use money from their retail side of their business to fund this because they want to put it on. And by closing this down, the CEO, Eric Artz, that means they have to lay off 200 full-time employees and 250 part-time employees. Seems like kind of a lot, but then you realize that REI has more than 16,000 employees. So kind of small in the grand scheme of things, but it is also just kind of sad. It is the fourth round of layoffs since late 2023. So they've really been doing what they can to get back to profit. They are also going to try and flatten their leadership, basically saying there's too many levels from the very top to the bottom. And, so I thought this was interesting. They have close to 25 million members, and about 9 million members have purchased something, and then 40,000 went through one of those experiences. So when you look at the numbers, yeah, like you're losing money for not really helping that many people. And I get that by the numbers. It just also kind of makes me sad because I think it's part of their personality and part of like what sets them apart. Right. So I don't know. I have conflicting feelings on it. I think it makes sense financially and by the numbers, but it is a little sad. I also, I don't hate going back to what you focus on. They're going back to what they're focusing on, which is like retail and outdoor wear and things like that. I think you're seeing that with Barnes & Noble. They're coming back and they're going to really focus more on books, because if you remember going to Barnes & Noble, they were selling all these sorts of things. Also, way back in the day, Facebook had this thing called Facebook Watch, and it was starting to get into the streaming industry. So anyway, I think it's interesting when you see companies kind of going into different directions and then maybe coming back to their core. So, Lorrie, your website shows that you have a lot of different services. I was looking at those employee benefits and, this kind of insurance. Have you had to ever kind of cut back in areas, or how do you approach kind of all the different areas that you kind of go into?
Right. Think about it. The evolution of company is really, really serving your client and their needs, right? And so even if I look back at MCM, our original is we had a venture capital kind of division, because we were doing a little bit of that. We had sort of another division that did kind of offshore business. And so sometimes you do things because your clients or your constituents are wanting to do it. But sometimes it shifts, right? Mm-hmm. And I can see that with REI, because think about the experiences that you go through, whether it's all these other companies are going the bandwagon, whether it's Expedia, all the travel companies doing these things, right? Remember, there used to be Rick Steves as an example. And now you might be planning a trip because you found an influencer on Instagram or TikTok, right? So I can see how that evolves over time. I think the internet, honestly, has more information for you to do that. So back to going back to, our companies is really, you have to kind of make adjustments for the greater good. So I understand it coming from a leadership perspective, and would those lines of business, although they served, in my case, a few clients, it didn't serve the greater good. Yeah. Right. And as a leader, you're serving people. We're in the position of serving others, and sometimes you got to make hard calls. And I've made some of those in my career, and it's not easy. And so, I feel for the leaders who are having to do that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, it does take a strong leader to deal with layoffs, especially how many that they've done. So, I know you're a big advocate for leadership, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about kind of your philosophy on leadership and how you approach your role here.
Sure. So again, as I kind of mentioned before, I think the best leaders make other people better. And what I firmly believe is when, how you hire somebody and how you let them go says a lot about who you are as a leader. And so, what I really believe in is, treating people with kindness, number one, with respect, number two, and honestly helping them to, get another opportunity, number three. I have a leadership philosophy that everyone needs pie in their lives. And I'll share that with you. You and I chatted about it. And P is for professional, I is for image, and E is for exposure. That's what pie means. And throughout your leadership kind of journey is, you as an individual are seeking pie. People are helping you be a better professional, helping you with your image, exposing you to things. And if you've done that, to other people, they get a better shot. So in the case of layoffs here is that, again, maybe you help them with interviewing. Maybe you expose them to other people that might be looking for a job. Maybe you kind of help them with their professional acumen, giving them knowledge so they get to a better place. And so providing pie to people and you receiving it is going to be helpful for any leader.
I love that. Pie, everybody. That's good.
You need some pie. Sometimes I was telling my team, when they're having trouble with an employee, it's like, well, maybe they need some pie. What part of pie do they need? And so, they're really great here, but they're not good here. Like, well, our job is to make people better. So I think from a leadership philosophy is people follow people. And if you can help somebody be better, then you've done your job. I
love that. It's very well said. I have one more question on this article and then we'll kind of do our closing question. But, part of laying people off is, you're saving money not only on their salary, but also all the benefits, right? Like health insurance and whatnot. How do you help these businesses decide on their benefits? I talked to one person and she was saying, behind closed doors, they had to decide about a policy that was going to help everybody in the company except for one person. It was going to really screw over one person. And she was like, it was the hardest decision I've ever had to make. So I don't know. I want to talk about how much do these employers pay? I don't know if you have dollars or percentages, because I think sometimes the anger can be put on the employer of why are our benefits so shitty? And they're so cheap and blah, blah, blah. So from a, business owner, employer perspective, what are they dealing with?
Sure. So, like any business, you have to kind of maintain costs and so you can, maintain profitability, right? And if you think about employee benefits in general or any insurance costs that you have, the biggest costs that a company would incur in an organization is people costs, right? Like compensation. And then within that cost is benefits, right? And so really, after you pay your salaries, the next biggest bill you're going to pay is your insurance bill, right? And then so healthcare is going to be really key. So if you're thinking about in that situation of medical insurance, I think what happens is most employers are going to want to understand, okay, what am I willing to spend in the coming year, right? This is our budget, right? And if this is our budget and, these are the actual costs that, you're getting rates from carriers, or if you're self-insured as an organization, this is the amount that you're willing to spend. You have to decide what the company's going to pay and what you're going to have your employees absorb. Yeah. Right. So it's sort of a balance between the two. And so I think it's important that you work with your brokers to really understand, how do you get to the middle ground, right? Some employers want to push all of the costs to their employees, which is not very favorable. Don't love that. Right? Mm-hmm. Because they're trying to meet their targets, right? Or sometimes you meet in the middle. And, when you get really creative, maybe it's this line of coverage that's not really used and maybe we have a higher deductible there. So really understanding all layers of the coverage and then being creative in that and really finding what do we absolutely have to have. So in that situation, the majority of claims are here. So we need to have this type, right? And honestly, having a conversation, right? These are our people and they drive our business. And when you have a situation like that, talk them through it and we can figure out how to mitigate. But these are bigger decisions, right? And so sometimes there's one person that might not get it. But I think if you're as an employer and you know who that is and you can at least help talk through what are the options around that.
Yeah, it's a tough decision and it is really expensive. Like you said, it's their second biggest line item after compensation.
Yeah. And I think about inflation, right? So inflation's coming up and you're kind of figuring, but then the employee costs are coming up. So it's like this, it's an ongoing battle. It's like, what are we willing to absorb and what do we have to push through employees? And so I think it's something that you have to work closely on a consultative basis with your broker.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up. And our last question, I always ask either what's the best piece of advice you've ever received or just what kind of advice do you have for the listeners? And this can be personal, professional. You've already given us a lot. So if it's okay if you don't have something.
Sure. But. No, I have always something fun. I think, obviously, I believe in our business. And I think for anybody, going into the workforce is kind of, being willing to get some pie to help you, for sure. But, I learned kind of this one little thing I'm going to share many years ago, and I thought I'd share with all of you. So in your 20s or before you hit the age of 20, your only job is to do good in school. Mm-hmm. In your 20s is to find somebody to follow. Okay. In your 30s is to figure out what you're good at. Okay.
Okay.
In your
Writing that
40s, yep, figure out what you're good at. In your 30s, in your 40s is do what you're good at and only what you are good at. In your 50s, you train other people, and in your 60s, you go to the beach. So, anytime I mentor individuals, even my staff, people that have worked with me throughout my career, is that really, and when you're young, try things out. Do great in school, by the way. Like, do good in school because you're going to learn that. And then, but, find somebody to follow. And sometimes the people you follow might not be so great, but you're going to learn from it. Right. Absolutely. That relationship, but recognizing that is going to be really important. And in your 30s, really evaluate, what am I really good at? And every time I say this and I talk through this with individuals and I mentor, they're like, what if I haven't figured out what I'm good at?
Yeah,
I go, at the end of it's not too late. Just like write it down.
Yeah.
And there's I talk a lot about joy, honestly. And my biggest thing is really, if you want to get the best outcome, is be around people that bring you joy. Do what brings you joy and focus on joy, not only for yourself, for sure. You got to take care of yourself and for the people that are around you. And I think, if you enjoy somebody, those relationships pull you forward, right? And those conversations pull you forward. So I try to focus on joy in my career and my life. And, my hope is to go to the beach sooner than 60.
I love it. Well, you've brought me joy today, and this view has brought me joy. So thank you again, Lorrie, for taking the time, reading the articles, and sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.